type of approach is, you have this giant who, when he dies, his body parts become the earth and the sun and moons, and the lice on his body becomes humans. That makes you feel really good, doesn't it? How do you feel? I mean, how would you feel as a human if you knew that you were just some big cosmic creature's body lice? I mean, that doesn't give you a lot of importance, right? The Canaanites. Now, why are we talking about the Canaanites from the background of Jonah? Okay, so today, modern scholars refer to the Canaanites, not talking about the Canaanites when Joshua went into the land necessarily, but the Canaanites that were left behind, that were north of Israel, that remained, were the Canaanites. But they are called something else today by scholars. In fact, we use this term, and it is what? Iraqis, not quite. About 800 miles to the west. Phoenicians, the Phoenicians. So the Phoenicians were the Canaanites. Now, why do we know the name Phoenicians? Say again? Well, Phoenicia is not a city. There's no city name. In fact, they would not have called themselves Phoenicians. That term was made up by the Greeks, Herodotus and some of those ancient people. So, for example, if you were a British historian and you were describing the United States of America in the early 1700s or maybe 1750s, 1760s, you would call us the colonists or the Americans. But did a Georgian and a Bostonian really have anything in common? Would they have considered themselves the same people? No, because they were what? Individual states or colonies. That's right. They were totally different. Different charters, different governments. Did they all speak English? Yes. Did they have somewhat similar culture? Yes, because they were all British, right? But they would not have considered themselves the same. And you've got to remember, back then, these little bitty city-states up along, a lot of them had different governments, kind of like you had in Britain when there was Northumbria and Wessex and Essex and all this stuff. So they had different kings, different kingdoms. They would say they would fight against each other, even though they may be 10, 15 miles apart, because they were different kingdoms. They would not consider themselves the same people. Did they have similar culture? Yes. Did they have similar gods? Yes. But they would fight each other. They were like different clans, if you would. Okay, but from an outside observer, it was really easy to just go, oh, those are just Phoenicians. Those are just Canaanites. Does that make sense? Those are just Americans, right? So these Canaanite people who lived next door to Israel, all right, we later call them Phoenicians. So when we use the word Phoenician and we use the word Canaanite, I'm kind of using them interchangeably, okay? And their culture, humans were created to serve the gods, and they came from primordial ooze. You are of ooze. Well, that's very consistent. We haven't come much far in 3,000, 4,000 years. You're just ooze, which is kind of what's being taught today. So, the Canaanites. Now, they did have a high god called El. How does that fits, right? Because we hear Jehovah, Yahweh, being called El. So there's probably some religious overlap here. He was the creator of all and the father of all, a wise ancient deity, the creator of creatures. We talked about this. Forward. Okay, So we're going back to the sailors on the boat. We went over this. So again, I don't think the pointer works too good. It won't show up on here. So let me show you this. So this is about the time of Jonah. I don't know who can see more, probably you guys. So again, we have Jerusalem, we have Judah, we have Israel. Now, when did this happen? After what kingship? Solomon. So who were the three kings of the United Kingdom? Not the UK. Saul, David, Solomon. And then after Solomon, you have this breakup. So here we have this group. Up here is the Phoenicians, those little, up there in gold. That's the Phoenician states. That's what we call them. We have Tyre, Sidon, Byblos. Byblos is called Giral, I think, in the Old Testament. It was called Giral a lot, but Byblos. These are old cities. And then we have the Philistine states, which are kind of these upstarts. These have been there 1,000 years before this. These are upstarts. The Philistines, we think, are new settlers that were probably of Greek origin, came over with maybe the Sea Peoples, but they're newer. But look up there at the top left. Tyre, Sidon, Byblos. There's mountains there. Look, the Assyrians. So what did those people not have a lot? What did they have a lot of, just by geography? Oceanfront property. And with oceanfront property comes what? What are you going to eat? If you have mountains inland, what are you not getting a lot of? What do you not have? If you have oceanfront property bordered by mountains, what do you probably not have a lot to do with? Farming. So that's all right. Put that down. We need wheat. We need food that comes from the ground. We got plenty of fish. We need grains. Okay. And I think we've talked a little bit, yes, that these Phoenician people were traveling all over the earth. I mean, the known world at that time. They were traveling to Spain. They were traveling all along the coast here. What's interesting is Carthage, which it becomes, as the Assyrians press in, they have all these, there are colonies all through here. And then Carthage, which is now in Tunisia, will be destroyed by the Romans because they're fighting the Romans back in 300, 400 BC. So the Phoenician influence continues for a long time, to the point that what happens is, who comes up and over the mountains? Y'all know that story? Who? Hammurabi? Hammurabi, no. Hammurabi was about 2,000 years before that over here. There's a guy in Carthage. No, we'll get to that. Do I want to get to that now? Yeah, I'll get to that now. So, Hannibal rides the elephants over the mountains. I knew you knew it. It's just 2 H's, right? Hector, Hercules. A lot of H's back then. Okay. So, let's talk about the Phoenicians. And we'll go back here. Remember, there's Tyre, Sidon, Byblos. Over time, just like the British monarchy, some of those get incorporated with each other and they get split apart. You're the king of Scotland and Britain or whatever. So what we see is long before the time of Jonah, there's contact with these Tyre people from Tyre, Tyrian people. So David, which is during the United Kingdom, reaches out to them. And he and Hiram, which is the name of the king of Tyre, when David comes in, Hiram sends to him and says, hey, we've got access to all these trees, which is another reason we have farmland, because you hear about in the scripture, the cedars of Lebanon. We got all these trees. We have great architecture because we travel, our people travel a lot. We have great stonemasons, we have great carpenters. And so David and Hiram start having this cultural exchange. You send me cedar, you send me workers, I'll send you grain. All right, so somebody read 1 Kings 5. Okay, so who's got a loud voice? Vance, can you see this? I want you to be ready to read 1 Kings 9, 26 through 28. Eric, if you'll read 1 Kings 5, 1 through 12. Dennis, if you'll read 1 Kings 10, 22. Now, I wish that gentleman was here that I've been torturing for 2 weeks in a row because I'd have him read, but no. Okay, so go ahead. We're reading about the relationship between both David and the people of Tyre, the king of Tyre, and Solomon. Okay, go ahead. Start with you, Eric.
Now Hiram, king of Tyre, sent his servants to Solomon when he...
Okay, so wait. We've transitioned. David's died. Solomon's king. So David starts this. Now Solomon.
When he heard that they had anointed him king in place of his father, for Hiram always loved David. Then Solomon sent word to Hiram, "You know that David my father could not build a house for the name of the Lord his God because of the warfare with which his enemies surrounded him until the Lord put him under the soles of his feet. But now the Lord my God has given me rest on every side. There is neither adversary nor misfortune, and so I intend to build a house for the name of the Lord my God, as the Lord said to David my father, your son..."
Can you stop for just a second? Why did Solomon have rest on every side?
Not at war with anyone.
Why was he not at war with anyone?
They conquered.
They'd already conquered them, right? So that's, we talk about people who are born in the nest, and then they look down and say, "Look how high I've flown." So he kind of, in some ways, as a king, is born with a silver spoon in his mouth. He doesn't have to do anything. David did all the conquering. So go ahead.
"And so I intend to build a house for the name of the Lord my God, as the Lord said to David my father, your son, whom I will set on your throne in your place, shall build the house for my name. Now therefore command that cedars of Lebanon be cut for me, and my servants will join your servants, and I will pay you for your servants such wages as you set, for you know that there is no one among us who knows how to cut timber like the Sidonians."
Wait, but he's the king of Tyre. And he says, well, no one knows how to cut timbers like the Sidonians. That's up the river a little bit, right? It's not the same place. But it just shows they're in some type of cooperation with this other nation state. Okay?
As soon as Hiram heard the words of Solomon, he rejoiced greatly and said, "Blessed be the Lord this day, who has given to David a wise son to be over this great people."
Wait. He said what? What did he say? You said it right. I'm just making you re-say it. Hiram said, this king of Tyre who worships other gods said what? How did he find out about God? Yahweh. Yeah, okay. So we see God's plan a little bit in action here, right? So what's the purpose of Israel? Besides bringing forth the Savior, to be a light unto the nations, right? Okay, look here. We got a little light. Go ahead.
"And Hiram sent to Solomon, saying, I have heard the message that you have sent to me. I am ready to do all you desire in the matter of cedar and cypress timber. My servants shall bring it down to the sea from Lebanon, and I will make it into routes to go by the sea to place you direct. And I will have them broken up there, and you shall receive it, and you shall meet my wishes by providing food for my household. So Hiram supplied Solomon with all the timber of cedar and cypress that he desired, while Solomon gave Hiram 20,000 cores of wheat as food for his household, and 20,000 cores of beaten oil. Solomon gave this to Hiram year by year, and the Lord gave Solomon wisdom as he promised him, and there was peace between Hiram and Solomon, and the two of them made a treaty.
Okay. All right. So you have someone who's been influenced by the Israelites. He's praising God. I don't know who else he's praising, but here he's praising God. We've made some inroads. Okay. So how does this develop? Go ahead, Vance.
King Solomon also built a fleet of ships at Ezion-Geber.
Whoa. Where?
Ezion-Geber.
Yeah, I don't know how to say that either. That's what I would say. So, anybody know what this is?
Dead Sea?
This is the Dead Sea. Sea of Galilee, Dead Sea. Wait, Solomon made a fleet of ships.
It says on the Red Sea.
Huh?
It tells you where it is.
What? Where is that?
It's near Eloth on the shore of the Red Sea.
The Red Sea. Well, I don't see the Red Sea on here. Well, here's the Red Sea. Here's Tyre, Sidon, Byblos. This is the Phoenician states. Here's Israel right here. And he's going to make a port right there. Well, how did he do that? Solomon makes a port there. Oh yeah, I wrote it down. Sorry, that's not right. I gave the answer. So David had conquered the Edomites. So now Solomon's ruling all the way down to here, including that part right there. So they have a port on the eastern part, eastern horn of the Red Sea. All right, go ahead, Vance.
A port near Elath in the land of Edom, along the shore of the Red Sea. Hiram sent experienced crews of sailors to sail the ships with Solomon's men.
Okay, so Hiram, still king, sends sailors across land because there was no what? Temple? Timber. Right. Well, he had sent timber. So by this point, Solomon's building a port here. But what exists right here now? Now. There's something right here.
Suez Canal.
The Suez Canal. You don't have to go around anymore. So, now could the Phoenicians have sailed around Africa? They could have. What we don't know that they did until about 600 BC. That's crazy to me. So what happens is about 150, 200 years after this, the Pharaoh of Egypt commissions the Phoenicians to sail around Africa. And people are like, really? And they describe the sun rising and falling on the opposite side of the ship. So it definitely sounds like they did, which, the Straits of Magellan, Straits of Magellan, is that? No, Cape of Good Hope. That's difficult navigation, but it sounds like they probably did. So they're talented, but it sounds like they probably went across land to get to here. And so, Vance, continue.
They sailed to Ophir and brought back to Solomon some 16 tons of gold.
So they sailed to Ophir, and they got all this gold and stuff. We don't know where that is. Still don't know. Nobody knows. Now, what's interesting to me is Kings 10:22. I think that's 1 Kings.
Oh,
So Solomon, I'm sorry, for the king, who is Solomon, had ships at sea at Tarshish with the ships of Hiram. Every 3 years, the ships of Tarshish came bringing gold, silver, ivory, apes, and peacocks.
They went to Georgia. So we see here that there was this 3-year cycle that Solomon and Hiram had their co-managed, I guess, ships, their fleet, and they would go out on 3-year cycles. And they would go to where? I should have done a better job with your reading vision.
Well, Tarshish, it didn't say they had ships at
Tarshish.
Tarshish. They just came bringing this gold, but I'm not sure it says in this verse where they were at.
Oh, I thought it said Tarshish.
Tarshish is, yeah, I guess,
Tarshish. So they're sailing out of the Red Sea, going to Tarshish and bringing back gold and spices and gorillas, chimpanzee, apes, peacocks. We don't know that it's technically what we would call a peacock, but they're bringing all this stuff back. And you know, Solomon's sending out, he's bringing things from all over the world. But it seems weird to me because we've been talking about Tarshish being in Spain or maybe in Turkey. But this is a different Tarshish because they're not getting to Tarshish, Spain by this route. They could always go via Tyre and Sidon. So what's this Tarshish? What did we talk about? What do we know about Tarshish? Not a lot. We don't know exactly where it is. But what did they refer to the Tarshish as? When they said Tarshish, what were they saying? It's a kind of a euphemism. Do we do that today? How many times here in the South, I know in Tennessee, we go to this place a lot. We have a lot of friends who go to this place. I have more friends who've gone to this place than many other places. Timbuktu. How many of you have had a friend who went to Timbuktu? Literally, probably not. Colloquially, all the time. Right? So we use Timbuktu maybe the way they use Tarshish. If you're an Israelite, if you're someone who doesn't travel, and farthest you've gotten, like Jesus, is like 100, 150 miles from home, and somebody is explaining someplace in India or someplace in East Timor or Somalia, you ain't got no reference point. That's just Tarshish. Whether it's to the east or whether it's to the west, it's far beyond what I can understand. They just went to Tarshish. So, some people will point that out as a discrepancy. Well, Jonah went to Joppa, or Jaffa, what it would be now, and sailed west to Tarshish. Well, we see here in Kings that Solomon's crew sailed east and went to Tarshish. The Bible's wrong. Not necessarily. It's a euphemism, perhaps. All right, but what we see here is Solomon and David are cultivating this relationship with Tyre and Sidon, an alliance, right? But what happens with Solomon that David doesn't do? David has a political and economic alliance, but what happens to Solomon? How many of us work with people that we get along with, we're friendly with, we minister to them, we have a reciprocal relationship with them, but there's definitely a border of how deep our friendship goes. Most of us. who do I have the closest, most intimate, most intellectual, most spiritual relationship with? That woman right there. So what happens with Solomon?
As a matter of diplomacy, Mary's always winning from other states.
Right. So we start to have the intermarrying. And what happens when you marry someone, if you're a good spouse? You want to make them happy. And so how do I make my wife who worships all these other gods happy? Worship her God, or give her a temple, or create a place for her to worship. And all of a sudden you start this. Be careful who you marry. Be careful who you do business with. Be careful with who you marry. And for the very few of you who are not married, I would say 0% of people in our culture marry anyone who they didn't date. Right? So that's a bonus. So what we see here, which is me just being a little bit academic, I guess, this is writing that's kind of like hieroglyphics. This is what the Minoans wrote. It's called Linear A. This is Linear B. These writing systems went extinct. This is kind of early Greek writing which died. Kind of an early Greek writing which died. This is the Phoenician alphabet. It's also kind of based on hieroglyphics. These were kind of based, kind of like Chinese, and they weren't related, but I mean, these represented perhaps ideas or things. Like this could be pig, and this could be house, and this could be God, and this could be, and then eventually you end up getting syllables. But it was so much to learn. I mean, even Chinese people today, a lot of them don't know how to write all the Chinese characters because there's so many of them. And so what happened was the Phoenicians developed an alphabet that were based on sounds. So this isn't a one character Bible. This is, we say the word Bible, but then we spell it B-I-B-L-E. And so they would write based on the sounds. So they didn't have consonants. You had to kind of fill in the blanks there. And then the Phoenicians, this Greek alphabet, which is we're very familiar with, is directly from Phoenicians. But you'll see that Phoenician alphabet basically in the Latin alphabet, the Greek alphabet, the Cyrillic alphabet. So this idea of their culture, their language, gets spread all over the place. So the Phoenicians are extremely important in this world history context. So back to the people. They're Phoenician, they're under patriarchy, which, what does that mean?
Heads of families rule.
Heads of the families rule. So what is their job? Now we know what the Israelites, what they were required to do. How do we know that? You got a whole testament, right? Very specific of what they were supposed to do. The Phoenicians, what were they supposed to do? To please God. What's the patriarch law? Yeah, which today we know as, what were they specifically supposed to do? We don't know. We're not told, right? We can kind of extrapolate some things. Oh, I got my slides out of order, sorry. But we'll go through this. So we know that at some point, God said, and let's see if I may have to go backwards. Okay. So we know that there are Old Testament people living not under the covenant with Abraham who were faithful to God. We've got examples. Somehow they have some type of contact with Jehovah and they are deemed faithful. But we also know that Paul says that God gave them over to their disobedience. When did that happen?
When the Gentile nation began turning away from God, and they're more with life.
Do we know, does the Bible kind of give us insight as to when this happened? So, when does God choose Abraham? No, in the Bible. I'm going to create a Garden of Eden. You are going to live and work and be in communion with me. And then soon what happens? I want to be like God. So they're cast out of Eden. Evil continuously. Then what happens? The flood, judgment. All right. So we have the flood, and God brings them out, and he says, what did he say to Adam and Eve? I'm sorry, my slides are messed up. We had a lightning strike last night. I'm sure they're in here. I thought I'd saved them in the right order. I apologize. We'll probably get these slides later. So what did God tell Adam and Eve before the fall? What were their instructions? Don't eat of this tree. Dress and keep the garden. Be fruitful and multiply. And no, be fruitful and multiply. What was the second half of that? Subdue the earth. Make the earth work for you. Basically what that word means, right? Take what I've given you and do something with it. All right, we have the fall, we have the flood. He brings them out of the flood. So at that point, if you're Noah, his wife, his boys, his daughters-in-law, you've seen what happens when you disobey God. God tells them what? You get out of the boat, what does he tell them to do? Be fruitful, multiply, spread across the whole earth, and make use of it, subdue it. All right. How long does it take after that before what happens? So a bunch of them, doesn't mean all of them, they all get to one place, probably in Mesopotamia, Babylon area, and what did they say? Let us make a name for ourselves. Let's build a tower unto heaven. So what are they doing for a third time? Yeah. I mean, it's not that hard. Be fruitful and multiply and use this creation I've given you and make something out of it. I mean, I'm not asking you to cure cancer here. Just go and enjoy what and spread across the earth and have babies and have families and listen. The patriarchal law isn't that hard. We're going to get to that. This is what I want for you. But just like Eve and Adam, and just like the people were conquering and taking over this evil, and then within just a few generations, what are they wanting to do again? I want to do what I want to do. And that, it looks like, is when God says, okay, I am going to honor your will. You guys want to have it your way. Have it your way. I am no longer going to be your God. As nations, does that mean that God doesn't speak to heads of families who are seeking him? Absolutely not. Right? That's part of patriarchy. So God is undoubtedly speaking to heads of household as people are seeking him, but he is not actively involved in quote unquote pressuring or guiding, except for one family. And what family is that? Abraham. Now, how do we know that there are other people outside of Abraham that are in relationship with God? We've got two examples. Job and a lot, but he's associated with Abraham. But you're right, he's with Abraham. He's part of that. Melchizedek, who are obviously following God, although they're not Abrahamic, right? So this is where we get into a lot of debate. So the question here is, God's given them up. He's letting them suffer the consequence of their choice, consequence of their actions. He's giving them up to their disobedience. And this is from the Psalm 82, I think. Remember the days of old, consider the years of many generations. Ask your father and he will show you, your elders and they will tell you. When the Most High gave to the nations their inheritance. When he divided mankind. That sounds like after Babel. He fixed the border of the peoples according to the number of the sons of God. But the Lord's portion is his people. Jacob is his allotted inheritance. So, what does that mean? Are we sons of God? Yes. Bene Elohim, sons of God. Who is frequently called the sons of God in the Old Testament? Angels. There's the debate. So, is God saying, I'm going to let you guys who are not Israel, I'm going to let you guys be your own kings, your own princes, your own rulers. I'm going to be the king over Israel, and let's see how this goes. Or is he saying, I am personally taking responsibility for Israel. I'm going to assign angels or spiritual beings to be over you. I'm dividing it out. These people are going to get the Most High God, who's all good, all this, all infallible truth. You guys are going to get these lesser beings, still angelic beings, and you guys are going to see what it's like not living for me. Having someone who's not the highest being. Now, today, most people today, if you read commentators or people who think about this, would say it's number one. He's giving people autonomy and the consequence of their choices. But up until about the 7th century after Jesus, and a lot of the people who are writing before Jesus would interpret this as spirits. He gave these angels responsibility. And what happened with the angels? They messed it up, right? And so if you had a spiritual being as your leader, would it be easy for that angel to then say, get a little haughty and want to become the object of your worship instead of deferring to God? Well, you're mine. I mean, you're responsible for you. And so God made for one every nation. We talked about this. And so here is Psalm 82. God has taken his place in holy council. In the midst of the gods, he holds judgment. And he says to these gods, how long will you judge unjustly and show partiality to the wicked, give justice to the weak and the fatherless, maintain the right of the afflicted and the destitute, rescue the weak and the needy, deliver them from the hand of the wicked? They have neither knowledge or understanding. Why? They don't have God, right? They walk about in darkness, and all the foundation of the earth are shaken. I say, you are gods, you are most sons of the Most High God. All of you, nevertheless, like men, you shall die and fall like any prince. Arise, O God, judge the earth, for you shall inherit the nations. So, is he talking about here? Is he talking about men who have put themselves up as gods? Or is he talking about angels who are functioning, making themselves out to their people as gods? We don't know. I think most people would say today, he's talking to these men as though they are gods because they're putting themselves as on God's pedestal, and therefore they're going to be treated like gods. However, fallen gods. If it's angelic, right, then that sounds very angelic here. Hey, you guys have tried to usurp me just like Satan did. So in some ways, could you, and again, I'm not saying this is the way it is, but could you understand how a people would start to have these ideas of a pantheon of gods? And the idea that if I have a God who's the God over the Tyrian people, that I could run away from it if I went to far enough away. That's not his wheelhouse. Or there's a river God. We're river people, we have a river God. And you see how maybe this idea could spring from that.
Job 1 verse 6. He says he brings the sons of God to him. And when he's talking to Satan specifically about, have you seen my son? It's Satan's been there on the earth. So it appears that very likely that idea that you're presenting could be the sons of God who've been appointed over that.
Yeah. There's a lot of apocryphal writing with Enoch and Maccabees and all this stuff of the Watchers. And it's very popular today, all this angelic and demonic. But I'm going to close with this. If you read Daniel 10, there's an idea of Gabriel and Michael talking to Daniel about the things that they're trying to accomplish on behalf of Yahweh, but the prince of Persia and the prince of Greece, which doesn't sound like necessarily the physical prince, some type of is opposing them. And then Paul is very clear here. What pagan sacrifice they offer to demons and not to God. He speaks a lot of rulers, authorities, cosmic powers, spiritual forces. Disarm the rulers and authorities, put them to open shame. Neither angels, rulers, powers can separate us from Christ. So, I know in our modern scientific perspective of things, we're very hesitant to talk about the demonic and I'm not saying that's active today, but we see in Scripture there are forces out there that in our vernacular, our experience, we really can't explain. I will say that we better stop there so I can develop that thought more deeply. But I want you guys to think about this and look into it and kind of get your ideas and form some thoughts, because these Phoenician sailors who Jonah's going to go to, this is their background, and I think you can understand how they react when Jonah comes to them, and then how responsive they are based on some understanding of their background, how they think and why they think. I have not been given the signal, but it's coming. Thank you.